Hello and welcome to A More Perfect Podcast. I am your host, Mike Winson. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe, hit those buttons, follow those places. In the wake of everything that has transpired during this election cycle, I felt the need to talk about where we go from here. Not in terms of politically, but socially. There are a lot of hurt people. There are currently a rather large divide that has caused a lot of conflict. And I happen to have a good friend who is an expert in managing conflict. I know because I took his class many, many years ago. I want to welcome a professor in counseling and leadership, Dr. Rodney Cooper. Hello, Dr. Cooper. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mike. I'm doing well. Thank you for the privilege of being here. I look forward to dialoguing with you about this, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Look forward to getting some different perspectives because there's a lot going on. It's been it's been a interesting year. I'm going to go with interesting. I think that's probably as good of a description for the last year as possible.
Very much so.
As we discussed right beforehand, there's probably about half of the country that is unhappy about this most recent election cycle. One of the things that I've noticed is in the other election cycles that we've been a part of, there's been, Democrats and Republicans have never agreed with each other. I mean, that's why they're different parties. But I feel like this year, this election cycle has been different in terms of what is causing the divide. And I think just to kind of set it up, I think a good way of showing the difference is if you've ever seen the video of John McCain doing a town hall where someone was asking a question saying, he didn't trust Obama because they thought that he was a Muslim. And John McCain was like, no. Obama's a good guy. We have differences in what we believe, but he's a good guy. You can trust him. But, I'm running against him because we have policy differences, severe policy differences.
Exactly.
Where my perspective, and this is where I want to start, is my perspective is this election cycle, to me, it has felt like it's not a difference in economic policy. It's not a difference in foreign policy. To me, at least, it's felt like a difference almost in morality, because I feel like the Republican Party, at least the far right Republican Party, while they talked a lot about economics, and obviously we've got economic issues in this country that we have to deal with, the part that they talked about a little less, but has affected a lot of people on the more progressive side, has been these these inalienable rights that we as Americans are supposed to have here, i.e. bodily autonomy, safety, security, freedom to have religious freedom or lack thereof, freedom of speech, all these different things that I feel like that's where the difference is now. And that's where I think the struggle that a lot of people are having post-election, because now I feel like we've got two different groups. We've got one group that interestingly enough, while should be really excited that Donald Trump won, are still really angry. Which is I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, but also then we'll go right into after that. The people that voted for Kamala Harris are not only hurt, but angry, and in many ways shutting off relationships with anyone that voted for Donald Trump, and using. This is where I wanted to tap your expertise in this, and where do we go from here? So I want to talk about, I would actually be interested in your perspective on why you feel like there is still so much anger from the people that won, that should be happy that they won.
Yeah, I think your analysis and the way you're looking at this is very spot on. it's almost like we're happy that we're glad we got the candidate that we wanted, but on the other hand, it's because of the lesser of two evils.
Mm.
So it's not that we got somebody that we think is perfect in terms of all the criteria, but it's almost like if I have to vote for one way or the other, I'm going to vote for the one that's at least a little closer to where my possible view of what America should be or what we should be heading towards. At least I'm going to go that direction. Neither are perfect. In fact, I've heard many Christians say, I can't believe this is the best we can do.
Yeah.
And so here we have these two individuals, Kamala Harris, and we've got Trump. And it's like, well, the lesser of two evils, I'm going to go with this. At least I think people feel like I'm going to dance with the devil I know.
Okay. Yeah.
So I know what this is about. I know who he is. I know the way that he operates. And yet I believe that he can at least somewhat represent a smidgen of what I think I can hold on to.
And I will say, just from the Christian side of things, I think this is you made a great segue into something that I have brought up a lot, and this is where I'd like to, you know, I grew up a Christian, been a
Yeah,
Christian, been going to church for 45 years,
yep,
almost
yep,
46 years. I have always been taught that we as Christians are supposed to live a certain way.
right.
And that, as a Christian, I've actually told people this is one of the few times in my life that I have had to sit down and consciously go, can I still go to church? Can I still even call myself a Christian? And the reasoning is, I have been told that I have been told that I am a demon, that I'm doing the work of the devil just because I was willing to vote for Kamala Harris. I have friends that are part of different marginalized communities. You are part of a marginalized.
Yeah, right.
The things that I have heard come out of the mouths of not just Trump, but the people that support Trump are almost antithetical to everything that I have been taught as a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear you say it, and I understand that, I've talked to many people that have voted for Trump or were at least supporting him. And I've heard people say that, but then my brain goes, okay, regardless of whether you agree with abortion, regardless of whether you believe that we were created to be living our lives the way someone who's part of the LGBT community does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're human beings. They're Americans. As a Christian, they are God's creation. I was taught to love everyone, just like the Good Samaritan loved the Judean who was beaten on the side of the road.
Right.
So how, like, I feel like this is where that difference in morality comes in, because I'm sitting here going, we have these people saying they didn't like either, and they're going for the devil that they know. It's like, but the devil that they know is actively speaking hate
Yes.
to Americans.
Right.
And it's like, and this is where it goes into the second part. How do we move forward with that?
Yeah. Well, the way I move forward with it, at least I only have 4 more years of it. He cannot be reelected. But on the other hand, I have to step back, and you've made some good points. And I think this is where we have to begin to separate out Christianity from being an American. Because one of the key things that has happened in Christianity, well, let's put it this way, evangelical Christianity, which is the major supporting bloc behind Trump, we have to step back and say they equate being American with being Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yes.
when they vote for Trump, they're trying to rationalize, well, he's the most Christian guy we've ever had because look at the conservative group that he's putting in power in the Supreme Court, and look at all the other stuff and look at how he went against abortion. Forgetting the fact that he did backtrack on abortion during this whole time. In fact, they're going to find out very quickly that the person they thought was going to be their savior is going to end up being their judge.
Yeah.
Because he backtracks on anything that will, quote, get him where he wants to go. So I think their view is kind of a theocracy. If we can get the right judges, we can get the right, we will become a Christian nation. Now, let's go back to that. That's the assumption they have, that at one time we were a Christian nation.
Right.
Okay. That's a lie.
Right.
We've never, ever been a Christian nation. And it's hard for them to understand the fact that the first group that came here, the Puritans, were literally terrorists. They came in, they subjugated Native Americans, 12 million Native Americans, 8 million died because of all the stuff that came from the European framework and especially Puritanism. Okay, but that's being woke, according to them. So, so I'm with you, Mike. I think what we're finding is that these individuals have woven Christianity and being an American so much together,
Yeah,
that they see anything that is contradictory to that. I mean, all the founding fathers were slave owners. What do you do with that? So the key thing that we're looking at here is that it's not about morality. It's become about ideology.
Okay.
And so ideology is what's most important, not morality. My view of America, my view of the way things should be, my taking the scriptures like a wheelbarrow and just pushing it where I want it to go. That's what they do.
Yeah.
They can justify, well, God used King Darius. Yeah, well,
Right.
this guy ain't a king, so forget that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going, but they twist theology to fit ideology. And so and bottom line, it's fear. The fear of losing their place at the top of the heap.
But there is that feel, though, of a difference in morality, because there's one side, and that's probably, even when you were talking, that was one of the struggles that I was feeling, because there's one side that, there was a senator, a Florida senator, that called everyone in the trans community mutants. There's such a dehumanizing of marginalized communities, where it's like, not only, like, it's one thing if they were just Republicans that were, white men, white people, being the way white people have been in this country for centuries. But it's more because they have also connected themselves to Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why there's that feeling of it, even with me, as a difference in morality, because again, I go back to everything that I was taught. I was taught love your neighbor. I was taught the last shall be first and the first shall be last. I was taught, it's easier for the poor to get into a heaven than a rich man. Like, all of these things that I was taught, it just feels like those are ignored for the almighty dollar, for the power, the safety and security that the people on that side want to keep feeling, and completely ignoring what so many who are being marginalized in this country. And I think where the pain comes in is there's that larger group that was people towards the center that don't feel like they were willing to listen to those that were being hurt, and just thought about their pocketbooks, just thought about money. That's what
Yeah.
it felt like, is everything came down to money, and that was why their vote went that way.
Yeah. And I think and it's sugar coated with spirituality.
Yes.
And so what you're talking about, though, I mean, I think what we look at, though, is we go all the way back to the civil rights movement. Why did it take a civil rights movement to give black people what they had? And Trump wasn't even around then. So what I'm saying is this has always been the rub.
Yeah.
It's always been the issue of particular uh, groups from a particular background who are white and evangelical saying, no, we're not called to socialism, we're called to this. Now, what's happening is, I think, Mike, what I grieved most was not Trump getting elected. What I grieved most is that was the day that integrity died.
Mm.
There's no more integrity when it comes to the whole idea of electing someone.
Yeah.
And they don't have to have integrity because the issue no longer is about character. We lost that a long time ago. So character now is out of the picture. Now, the question I'm stepping back in is saying, but the church has also helped give people this sense of fear by saying, by putting into the churches that some of the churches I've been, voting guides to protect your rights, voting guides for that. So even the church has become complicit in fueling this whole idea of us versus them.
Yeah.
A zero-sum game. If they win, we lose. If we lose, they win. And I blame the church because who are the guys at the top of the church that basically they're making the money? They have the power. They're now getting into bed with Trump because they have this agenda. And you know what the scriptures say? You will not bring the kingdom in by violence. And they're trying to bring the kingdom in by violence.
Yep.
That's what I have to say is that they have no idea of the judgment they're incurring for themselves through this. This is not going to end pretty for them. I guarantee it.
So now we take this jump, and this is where your managing conflict doctorate is going to be hopefully become, at least can help some people. So now the question becomes, where do we go from here? Because we have groups of people that are scared. We've got groups of people that are in danger, especially if you're in places like Texas that don't have, that don't have protections for things like just pregnancies because of the abortion laws they put in. You could get raped and be forced to carry that child to term, and just all of these things that make people, feel not safe. So we have the situation where a lot of people are just shutting off everyone in their life that voted for Trump, or not dating, not going to, this is probably going to be a very lonely holiday season for a lot of people because they aren't going to families' houses. They're not going to their families' houses for the holidays because their whole family voted for Donald Trump. So how do we start? Like, what is the process? Because, one of the things that I say with the internet is, I keep having to remind people it's been 2 weeks and 3 days at the time of this recording since Election Day.
Right.
That's not that long.
No.
We're probably, I know I am. I'm still going through some level of a grieving process where there are some people that are like, we need to get back. We need to get going, which I agree. If we're on the progressive side, we need to plan, we need to prepare, we need to we need to work on messaging, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But how does that, I don't feel like we can just get over what the division is now, not in the same way we could before. Again, it was one, I like to compare it to, Red Sox fans and Yankees fans. We hate each other, but we can still be friends with each other.
Yeah.
But we hate each other. But this is not that. But I think there are some Republicans that think it's like that think that once the election is over, at least the way they've talked to me, is as though we can just go on, they'll just be like, nope, it's going to be okay now. So you don't need to worry about it. It's like,
Right.
do you hear what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Did you hear what I was telling you?
Right.
What I told you that I was afraid of. Now
Mhm.
you're coming back and saying, oh no, now don't worry. It's like, you think the fear is going to go away? Like, it's not a more taxes, less taxes thing. It's a livelihood. It's not even a livelihood. It's a life thing. It's a safety thing. Not for me. I admit, and I know I am a privileged white male Christian. I know that. I understand that. The only danger I have is, we've got a man going into office that talks about how he doesn't, things that he potentially will do to anyone that talks out against him. But
Right.
in the grand scheme of things, I'm a white male Christian. I'm as privileged as you can get in this country, and I understand that. But my empathy is in full gear to everyone who I know and every friend that I have that is scared and angry. And I feel like that's why I wanted to get you in is how do we start? Where do we go in the future with this for the managing of this pain and this conflict that we have now into the future?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, and I had to go through this to some degree. First of all, we're grieving. So we need to allow ourselves to grieve. We need to allow ourselves to come to the point of, okay, I need to accept it. This is where it's at. But I'm going to go up and down the ladder. One day I'm going to be angry. One day I'm going to be in denial. One day I'm going to go through this for a while just because of how deeply it impacts who I am and my values. Now, secondly, the reason it impacts us is because we've gone into the future and we've brought it back to the present, thinking that it's a fact. I don't know exactly what's going to happen 4 years, 1 year, 3 years from now.
That's true.
I have no idea what's going to happen
that
next
is a
week.
famous saying of mine to my community is anything can happen.
And see, what I'm saying is we have to then get away from making the future that we envisioned as a fact and saying, no, it was a possibility, but at no time was it ever a fact. And the people who voted for Trump, it's not a fact for them either, because we recognize the fact that even if the Republicans are in control of the House and of the Senate and of the presidency, the bottom line is there's enough people in places of power and enough people in those positions that are going to make it very difficult to push forward an agenda that's going to be carte blanche accepted.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to come back and say it's like the country is it's like we're in a state of depression.
Yeah.
And when you're in depression, the future sucks, the present sucks, the past sucks. It all sucks. And so we have to come back and say, wait a minute, it hasn't always been this way. It won't always be this way. It's this way right now. And what I say about conflict is, okay, they voted for him. Okay, I don't agree with them. But my question is, have I narrowed my relationship down so much to where everything revolves around their ideology? Because if it does, then I've come to the conclusion that I can't really be with anybody but people just like me. And that's anti-Christian as well.
Okay. So, and this is a great jumping to a question that I have, because one of the stories that you often use, that I use all the time now in the class that I took on managing conflict, was that idea of the bridge to die over. You've got things that are considered your bridge to die over.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's where the issue comes. And while I 100% agree with you, that's why I want to almost dig a little deeper down, is I think that is the issue. I think the people that voted for Kamala Harris because of this idea of the humanity side of things, like my life, my safety, my friend's safety,
Right.
the Americans' dignity, life, and safety.
Right.
That's why I voted for Kamala
Sure.
Harris. That's
Sure.
why I voted for the Democratic Party, because this is what, whether or not they'll be able to do it, this is what they're saying they want to do.
Right.
So what they see is they see their family members, their mothers, their fathers, their
Right.
uncles, whatever. You talk to them and you say, this is why I'm voting for Kamala Harris, because as a woman, I'm afraid that
Right.
I see these people that wanted to have kids but
Mm-hmm.
live in states where they have abortion bans, that because of the abortion bans there aren't enough OBGYNs, and they ended up having a complication and passing because it took them 45 minutes to get to the closest hospital with someone that could help them, because they're in an OBGYN desert now.
Right.
So I think that's where the issue is. So again, I think if we were both here in that line, I would agree. But I feel like there's at least a group of people, the ones that are doing the real shutting off. I feel that's why I say question this idea of the morality thing. They're looking at these people that are supposed to be their friends, they're supposed to be their family, they're supposed to love them unconditionally because of that, and they voted not against their wallet, but against their life, against
Yeah.
the life of other Americans. And how do you
Right.
get past that?
Yeah. I think, well, it's almost like you look at a Corey Ten Boom. How do you get past meeting the guy who was in the Holocaust over your sister and seeing her die and meeting him later and him being a Christian? How do you deal with it? I think the thing you have to step back and realize, from my perspective, in what you're talking about, is that why do we assume that things are supposed to stay the same? Why do we assume that it's supposed to have, maybe it's a revelation of the relationship wasn't what I thought it was, and I
Yeah.
have to now reconfigure what that looks like.
Yeah.
So I'm sometimes saying these things show whether I thought I had really good friends, and I came to realize that they had very, very different views than I had. And I step back and I go, well, how did Jesus have 12 guys where one was an activist for the Roman community and one was an activist to get rid of the Roman community? And yet they're in the same group.
Yeah.
Somehow they got through that. And what I'm saying is that the level of relationships I have change.
Yeah.
So I have to come to grips with the fact that, well, I'll have a relationship, and it may be a Weather Channel relationship.
Right.
I don't expect to go deep with you anymore. I don't expect to be connected to you that deeply anymore, but I will leave the door open that we can at least connect on a certain level. And let's have and let's realize that there's a place we can't go beyond. Well, there's this sense that, the people I thought were close to me, they're not as close to me because of where they went, who they voted for, what they did. And I'm stepping back saying, well, that just shifts the relationship to a different place. Now, am I going to cancel them out? Why would I do that? They still have a perspective that I need to understand and hear.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I accept it, but, God listens to us and hears our gripes, complaints, and everything, and doesn't say, well, I'm sorry, it's not in line with what I'm thinking. I cancel you out. No, it develops over a period of time to where now we start to move closer to each other, but it'll never be like it was.
Yeah.
To me, this is like the great divorce. There's a huge divorce, okay, but you're still in the same house.
Yeah.
And so if you're living in the same house, what can we do to be amicably? What are the bottom line? Well, amicably, I'm to show you respect.
Yeah.
I'm to remember you're made in the image of God. I'm to recognize the fact that, we still have a certain level that we are responsible for each other. And so I'm not just going to kick you out. I even have to love my enemies. Well, what does that mean? Sometimes loving a person means I can only interact with them in certain places at certain times because it will kill whatever relationship we have if we continue.
Yeah.
So that's
And
what I look at.
and you mentioned a great word that is interesting, is the word respect.
Yes.
This is I think where people, especially those that have either left the church or are outside of the church in the first place, they feel frustrated and like, I think that's part of the reason that you're seeing some more harsh cutoffs. So I feel like what I have noticed is, especially for people on the right, there is this idea. The way it seems is the people on the right can do and say whatever they want, and then they just justify it.
Oh yeah.
So what you see, what you're seeing is people on the left going, they say they want, they say like I can't tell you how many times I've heard the word respect is earned, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the way I've always understood it is, you can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do.
That's
right. So
right.
you can control that you give respect. You can't if your goal is to, like, even the idea of being earned is a relative term. Like, what you would consider is enough respect to earn respect back could be different than the amount of respect that I see. So the problem is we've got these people, like, you're looking at, your last statement was very much from a Christian perspective, which is okay. You are, you are a Christian, so you're going to see it that way. So, but then the problem comes is you have all of these people that, whether have been hurt by the church, or just aren't in the church, they see these people that are supposedly Christians that are doing and saying these horrible things, and there is no trust.
No.
So I think what they're seeing is this almost this dichotomy of, we are told, there's a lot of people that still come back sometimes to, like, Michelle Obama's statement of, is, when they go low, we go high. Like, there was, for years,
Martin Luther King. That's what he said.
For years, that was, that statement was out there. But there's many that feel like that idea, like that, because you have so many people, even ones that call themselves Christians, that have no qualms about going low.
Right.
And continue to want to go lower, it feels like.
Yeah.
That all the high is doing is, when you've got, it's that idea of, when you've got one person that is willing to do and say anything.
Yeah.
And you've got the other side that is not willing to do and say everything, that actually cares and wants to help.
Right.
All that it feels like that's happening is that they're getting taken advantage of for them being caring and respectful and wanting to the point where they don't feel like they have the ability almost anymore to give respect. All they do, it's like that idea of, they see them and all they feel is anger.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm saying go all the way back to the civil rights movement. Yep. Black people didn't have power. Black people couldn't vote.
It's true.
Black people couldn't get on a bus and sit in the front. None of that stuff. And where are we today? Well, it's because of the ethic of Martin Luther King, which says nonviolence. I'm going to take the higher road, and it's going to come to the point to where people realize these aren't Christians at all.
Yeah.
They aren't even Christians. So when you use that term, I'm going, well, if you put Jesus next to their behavior, what are you, to me, they're of their father, the devil. So I don't see them as being Christians.
Yeah.
I see them as utilizing Christianity for their own narcissistic purposes. But they're not Christians, because if they were Christians, then the book that they supposedly are believing in, they either, quote, don't believe it, or they never believe it to begin with. And so it's kind of like the Good Samaritan parable you talked about earlier. The real good person in this was the Samaritan, not the Pharisees.
Right.
So
Yeah.
why would I expect people who don't even espouse what the Bible teaches? How can I even call them Christians? So I'm thinking, yeah, that's what they say, but they're not.
So to go a little deeper on that, what I'm hearing is, and it's something that I've been saying myself a lot. It's not incumbent on those that are going to be the most hurt by the Republicans, by MAGA being in power, to quote unquote be the better person, because they're the ones that are going to be the most affected by it. They're the ones that are the most. What it really is people like me, as privileged of a person as you can possibly get, to actually be the one to, because, and again, you can tell me if I'm wrong. This is from any readings and stuff that I've heard. In the grand scheme of things, what got the civil rights movement over the edge was Martin Luther King having relationships with people that were privileged in the society,
there you go.
taking it up that next step. So
that's right.
When it comes down to it, it's incumbent on Christians that aren't ultra conservative and Christian nationalists, and white people that are privileged and understand and accept their privilege in it, being the ones that have to keep the conversation going, because
absolutely that has to happen. And I think it's real interesting too that I know that, and it's being in touch. And here's where I think the issue comes up for me, is that I wondered why so many, I was going, there's a ton of African American men who voted for Trump, and there were a ton of Hispanic that voted for Trump. And I was asking, I said, okay, what am I missing here? And I read a deal where a guy was saying, you know what, I don't like Trump's morality. I think he's a heathen. I think he's screwed up. He says, but I'm a trained engineer, and I was on the street living in my car. He says, I wasn't making anything to be able to take care of my family. He says, whether I like it or not, when Trump came into power, things did open up for me. I got a job to where now I'm making $85,000 a year. I'm taking care of my family. And it's because under the one administration, there were so many hurdles to jump through. I couldn't even get an opportunity. At least I got the opportunity under him. He says, I don't care about Christianity right now. All I care about is feeding my family. And so sometimes we have to step back and say, it's as simple as just straight out, if you're going to give me a shot to take care of my family, you can be the devil himself, and I'm still going to vote for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't have any certain basic needs that are being met, and this person at least gave you some of those opportunities, albeit not that many, because the Democrats, on the other hand, have great ideas, but they're called what I call elitist ideas. We believe in this, but you don't have the policies in place that are helping.
Yeah.
And so therefore, that has to happen. So in some ways, they've gotten out of touch.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is that whether we like it or not, we go with what felt needs are.
Yeah.
And the felt needs of certain people are, I got to eat. And if that's what's going to happen, so be it. So I'm at a different place. I don't have to go there.
Yeah. So then this goes to a different question of mine, because so let's take the situation of this engineer that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're a trained engineer, you are pretty smart. Engineering school is not an easy thing to do. And while I am not an engineer, I did go to school for business.
Yeah, sure.
And economics was a necessity in taking those courses.
You bet.
There was a big discussion, one of the things that I personally struggled with a lot was, I understand the idea of Maslow's hierarchy, but when you listen and you specifically look at the policies that Donald Trump was putting into place, or at least was talking about, that he was talking about wanting to do, like the tariffs, his idea of broad tariffs, 10 to 20% for everything and 60% for China. And I know history, and I know that the tariffs that they passed in 1929 were the at minimum extended, if not the impetus to the Great Depression.
Yeah.
His job will no longer mean anything if we have another Great Depression because of tariffs that we know that broad tariffs are inflationary. We know that it will make everything cost more. So
right.
this is while I get it and I hear it, there are also smart people that are just, it's like, and again, you have had more, you were also a trained counselor, so you know the brain a little bit better than I do. Where does that disconnect come in?
Well, I guess what I'm looking at is that it's hard to think about the future when you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to survive, this is the only future I have right now. For me to think about the future, that means I have the luxury to do that. That I have enough resources and I'm sustained enough that I can extrapolate what might happen. Right now, all I can deal with what is happening, and I'm surviving, and therefore I'm going to go into denial and not worry about the future. Right now is where I have to live. And so people who are in survival mode, that's where they go.
But and again, maybe again, it could be my privilege. Are they in that much of are they in so much of a survival mode that they are completely willing to ignore hundreds of economists that say that if you think you're paying a lot now, you will pay more?
But see, Mike, you're an informed person. They're not reading magazines, looking at stuff and hearing this. They're just saying, my kid's stomach's growling and I got to go do something about it.
That's fair.
And that's not just you. That's me too.
Yeah.
That's me too. I'm thinking about all the future implications and everything. They're going, what future?
Yeah. No, you're right.
So
how do we make people care about the future?
Why should they?
No, how do we encourage people to? Like, how do we make it a thing? Because it's not like my family is, we are lucky in many senses, but we're not millionaires. We're not even 100,000aires.
No, I get where you're coming from, but I'm saying, but isn't that the problem? We're so busy into the future that the current things that are happening right now are being neglected. And so we've got to buttress. It's a defense mentality. I've got to defend myself. And I'm stepping back saying, look, we're not in the future yet. In fact, there's a book out called The Certainty Principle, or The Myth of the Certainty Principle. And what they say is everybody's so certain that these things are going to happen, but it's a myth. They don't know.
That's true.
Could you have predicted COVID? Could you have predicted these other things? No, nobody predicted any of that. So why are we, quote, knowing the rapidity of change that we live in, so certain that this is going to be the case?
Well, I can tell you one of the reasons that we are that we as people that are very nervous about. I mean, I'm definitely not one of the people that thinks that what's happened is certain. Again, one of my anyone in my community will tell you the thing I say the most is anything can happen.
You bet.
But I think one of the reasons that this time, while yes, it happens all the time, literally, especially for the last year, the amount of things people have been certain about has been insane that haven't happened.
Right.
But I think one of the reasons that they are more nervous now than than they may have been is the Republicans own the presidency, they own the Senate, they own the House, and you could argue, well, not even argue, they own the Supreme Court. And I think they have seen 50-year precedent go out the window with Roe v. Wade.
Right.
They've seen things that shouldn't have happened happen. So I think there's a lack of confidence in our government, at least, in those checks and balances actually protecting us like they did in 2016.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about though is that it's affecting a different group of people. During the civil rights movement, we were supposed to have all those privileges and everything, but white people weren't being affected by it. Black people were.
That's true.
And then all of a sudden it became a huge issue. And from the ground up, it changed. I'm saying the people that are most concerned right now aren't exactly the ones that are now being affected by the things that others have been affected by for a long time.
That's true.
So I'm coming from but things changed. They're not the same. And so I look at it from the perspective that now I'm beginning to empathize appropriately with the people that have had to deal with this for years. They've had to go this for years. I think it starts with that alignment of saying, I'm finally feeling what they've been feeling this whole time.
Yeah.
I think that's where movements begin. And I think there will be a huge groundswell of movement that will take place that will totally, and we've had Republican administrations in all those places before, and still we were able to break through and get to the next place. So I think, what do we do next? We stand our ground. We hold where we are. We speak into it, knowing that just because people are in those positions, they're barely in the majority. Barely.
Yeah.
So it's not like it can happen overnight.
Right. No,
there
you're
can
right.
There can be enough stuff in the hopper to keep it stuck for 3 years to where it can change.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. So we've been talking, down in the weeds. Just to take it back just a little bit. So if you were to give advice to anyone listening to this, what would be your best advice for what people that are the ones that are hurting and suffering and are scared, et cetera, for the next, let's just say the next up until inauguration, like that preparation, that this period of time when we definitely don't know what's going to happen because none of them have the authority to do anything yet?
Yeah, I think one of the things is recognize you're grieving and that a death has taken place. And just like a death, it's going to take several weeks or months even to work through the stages of grief. That you're going to be going through days of denial and anger and bargaining. But one day you'll come to the point of acceptance and saying, okay, this is the way it is. Now, be around people who actually give you the experience of acceptance, give you the experience of support. And secondly, if you're an alcoholic, you don't go into a bar and say, I'm not going to drink. My view would be, don't listen to the stuff that comes out through social media or other places that are going to torque you off.
Except for this podcast.
Except for this, of course.
Please keep listening to this podcast.
But you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
Listen to the people who are sane.
Yeah. No.
Listen to the people who have at least a sane viewpoint, and don't listen to extremists because they're not the norm.
Yeah.
They just have the loudest voice.
Yeah.
So I would say allow yourself to grieve and get with groups of people where you can grieve.
I have been telling a lot of people that that probably the best thing you can do. I mean, it's the best thing you can do anyways, but finding a community of
Absolutely.
people that you can have around you that can support you.
Exactly right.
Especially if you're in one of those marginalized communities that
Yeah.
could be affected.
And the other thing I
than
realize is that
most.
as hard as this is more than me. I cannot take this personally. It's not just about me. There's a huge group of people out there that are beyond this. And so I have to recognize, remember, half the country didn't go there. So
more if you actually
Yeah.
go by the amount of voting age adults.
So what we're saying is that we have to come back to the fact that we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
And so don't act like I'm alone. Act like the fact that, okay, maybe this is going to bring about a movement in a way that we would never have imagined.
Yeah.
And will help bring about things that we never thought before. And secondly, it's also raised up who the people are that, quote, let's put it this way, we've turned over the rocks and now we actually see what's underneath them. Well, you can now work with the facts as opposed to guess about it. Now we know exactly what we have to do. So, and like I said, for me, this isn't going to last either. Like Ecclesiastes says, there are seasons. Okay, we're in this season, but this is not going to last forever because there'll be other seasons that'll come that'll be very much in our favor, I think. And we have to realize history's circular like that. So I'm going to step back and step in where I can and recognize that I'm not alone. That's key.
So the overarching message to everyone who's listening is anything can happen.
That's right.
Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for coming here. And
maybe
when we get a little farther into it, it would be interesting to bring you back on and compare what we talked about here to where we are and see what we need to do differently or if there's a different direction we need to go. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, Mike, I guess I want to also come back at, remember, we talked about the Supreme Court and how it's been stacked and that kind of routine. What I found interesting, though, is when some of these decisions came up, some of the conservatives went to the other side. And so there were decisions that were made that did not make certain people happy in the conservative movement. And I'm stepping back and saying, so we really don't know, because now that they're a lifetime appointment, their true colors for other things may come out more on the other side than we realize, because we've seen flashes of it. So you just never know, like you said. Just have to wait and see. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate this.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of A More Perfect Podcast. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, hit those buttons, follow those places so we can keep this movement of discussion and learning going. Again, thank you to Dr. Cooper for spending this time with us. I would say, where can they find you? But I know you enough to know no one can find you unless you want to be found. So,
well, you know where I live, so that's all.
I know where you live. So, again, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you guys next time on A More Perfect Podcast.